Well, good morning. As I've said from the very beginning, the extraordinary measures that we introduced during this pandemic were always intended as a last resort. And I stood at this very podium and promised you that these tools would only be used for as long as they were absolutely necessary, and not one day longer. The removal of these measures has always been our objective, and something we have collectively worked towards for months now. We started in January when we welcomed kids back to class and opened businesses. Since then, key indicators have steadily improved. At the peak of Omicron wave, over 4,000 people were hospitalized with COVID-19 in Ontario. That number has now dropped to 1,500. While percent positivity hit highs of nearly 40% in early January, it has now dropped to 13%. And Ontario's healthcare workforce continues to stabilize as we lift Directive 2 and restart more surgeries. Because of this progress, we heard from our Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Moore, 2 weeks ago, and again last week, that we were fast approaching a time when we could safely remove restrictions. Over the weekend, I received recommendations from Dr. Moore on a plan to safely reopen our economy and remove Ontario's vaccine passport system. I've accepted these recommendations, and so today I can announce that beginning on February 17th, we will remove all capacity limits except for sporting events, concert venues, and theatres, which will be capped at 50%. Some higher risk settings will also be capped at 25%. Social gathering limits will increase to 25 people indoors and 100 people outdoors. Organized public events will increase to 50 people indoors with no limits outdoors. Effective March the 1st, we intend to eliminate capacity limits in all indoor public settings. At the same time, and at the recommendation of Dr. Moore, we will lift proof of vaccination requirements for all settings. Based on the advice of Dr. Moore and what we have learned over the pandemic, we will need to keep masking in place for just a little bit longer. This is an important layer of protection that will allow us to proceed with our reopening plan safely. My friends, like all of you, I've waited a long time for this news, but please never doubt that the steps we took together, as difficult as they were absolutely necessary and saved tens of thousands of lives from COVID-19. And we're here today, we're able to take this step now because of each and every one of you, because of our nurses, our doctors, hospital workers, because of every single person who volunteered in a vaccine clinic, and every single person who played a part in this fight. And let me be very clear, we're moving in this direction because it's safe to do so. Today's announcement is not because of what's happening in Ottawa or Windsor, but despite it. On Friday morning, I made the difficult decision to declare a state of emergency in Ontario. The police now have every single tool they need. They have every resource available to them. And we've made progress since speaking to you last time. I want to thank our police forces for their efforts over the weekend. The blockade at our border in Windsor has now come to an end. The Ambassador Bridge has reopened. We have managed the situation at the Blue Water border crossing in Sarnia. Toronto Police Services have successfully contained a second weekend of protest in Toronto. And while Ottawa remains a more complex situation involving municipal, provincial, and federal law enforcement, all three levels of government are focused on ending the illegal occupation. To those who are still there, to those of you who are there with the sole objective of causing disruption and chaos, there'll be serious consequences for this lawless activity. We will continue to raise the consequences against those who are holding millions of jobs and people hostage. A number of personal vehicles were seized over the weekend, and those seizures will continue. Let me be clear. If you choose to use your vehicle to create chaos, you will lose that vehicle and your license, plain and simple. To our brave women and men in uniform, thank you for your service. Thank you for making us of the special powers we have authorized to manage the situation over the weekend. My friends, I know that this period has been one of the most divisive times in our history. And one of the hardest things about this pandemic is the way it's fractured us as a society. Differing views about government policies, the limits of personal freedoms, different views about vaccines, public health measures, and what steps are necessary. All of it has polarized us in a way that we could have never imagined. I've experienced this in my own family. It's been one of the hardest things my family and I have ever gone through. But for all of this, I can still take comfort in knowing that there remains so much that unites us. There's so much that still holds us together, and I take comfort in knowing that this awful pandemic will soon be behind us. And as hard as this period has been, time will heal this pain. And we will come out on the other end of this ordeal stronger, more resilient, and more united as Canadians. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario.
We'll go to the phone line for questions. Just a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up. First question, please.
Your first question comes from Chris Rishowie with the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, Chris.
Oh, hi. Hi there. Thanks for taking my questions. I'm just wondering if you can be a bit more specific about the masking mandate. What kind of things will you be looking at in order for that to happen, for it to be dropped?
Yeah, I'll pass that over to Dr. Moore.
Thank you. Well, I agree with the Premier. All of the metrics are improving dramatically in terms of the number of people hospitalized, number of people in the intensive care unit, the percentage of tests that are positive. So we'll continue to monitor those data sets as well as the ongoing availability of PCR to make a decision on masking. As you know, we've always moved public health measures in a staged, phased, and evidence-based approach. So we're opening up on the 17th, again on the 1st, and after that time period, typically 2 weeks thereafter, we'll review all of the data and make further decisions on any other public health measures.
Follow-up?
Yes, thank you. Premier, I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you feel about the federal government using the Emergencies Act. I mean, the military's been used for COVID-19, for BC floods, and I'm just wondering how you feel about the military stepping in potentially for the convoy protests.
Well, I'll be having a conference call with the Prime Minister and the Premiers at 10:15, so I may have to cut this off sooner. But I'm not too sure what the Prime Minister is going to discuss with us. But I will tell you, I'll support the federal government in any proposals they have to bring law and order back to our province, to make sure we stabilize our businesses and trade around the world as the world is watching us right now, wondering if it's a stable environment to open up businesses and expand businesses. These occupiers, they're doing the total opposite, what they say they're there to do. They're hurting hundreds of thousands of families, millions of jobs across the province. I've been speaking to numerous CEOs of Fortune 500 companies wondering if they should continue to expand. Well, my message to them, yes, we're open for business, continue to expand, and we will guarantee you a stable environment and to make sure we get goods from one side of the border to the other.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Cynthia Mulligan with City News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Premier. You made a point of saying that your easing of measures sooner has nothing to do with the protests. But I am going to ask you, does this decision have anything to do with politics versus science? We know there's an election coming soon. You don't want any of your base splintering off to other groups that are forming out of these protests. So how much of this actually is keeping an eye on the upcoming election?
Well, first of all, Cynthia, despite the protesters, this plan was in place long before the protests were out there. And I wouldn't call them my supporters necessarily. I think it's a mixed bunch of everyone down there. But at the end of the day, we need law and order. Our country is at risk right now. It's not just happening here in Ottawa. It's happening in BC and Alberta, New Brunswick, and I've been in conversations with all the premiers. This is unacceptable. We won't accept it. We're going to move forward. We're going to make sure that we get back to normal as quickly as possible. Again, despite the occupations, we're going to continue focusing on making sure that we have a safe environment for companies to do business and trade here in Ontario.
Follow-up?
And yet, Premier, our major trade route was very much impacted and halted the last few days. This question is from my colleague, Adrian Gabriel, and he wants to know, with so many border cities in this province that are key economic shipping points, what are you doing right now to ensure that our borders aren't taken hostage again?
Well, we've stabilized the Ambassador Bridge with a great work of our OPP and all other police agencies right across the province. We're working collaboratively with the municipal police and federal authorities as well. And we're going to make sure those borders are secure, that vehicles and trucks and transports and people can get across the border peacefully. I'm not going to tolerate anarchy at our borders or anywhere else. We need to get back to business.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Allison Jones with the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Hi, Allison.
Oh, hi, Premier. I'm wondering if you support the protesters' cause, if not their methods? You've talked many, many times before about how you were hesitant to enact the vaccine mandates and certificates. Now you're announcing their end. Do you agree with the protesters' cause?
Well, first of all, through the advice of Dr. Moore, we accepted the passports, and through the advice of Dr. Moore, we're going to get rid of the passports. I understand it's frustrating for everyone, but there's a level of frustration that you can go out there, peacefully protest, but when you start occupying borders, international trade corridors, it's game over. There's zero tolerance for that. Now you're putting people into jeopardy at hundreds of thousands of jobs. Plants were ready to close. I can't even begin to explain how serious this is. The world is watching, and we're going to make sure we tell the world. Again, as I said earlier, Ontario is open for business. We won't tolerate anything, especially insurrections, occupying areas, unacceptable. And I know the vast majority of Canadians agree with that.
Follow-up?
Yes, thank you. You're announcing the end to the vaccine certificate system. What about vaccine mandates like in workplaces, such as long-term care? Is that going to stay in place?
Yes, well, we have the mandates for the 2 doses. We're going to keep that in place. We want to make sure we secure areas for our most vulnerable. And our most vulnerable are in long-term care, they're in seniors' homes, and they're in hospitals as well. And since we've done that, the numbers have come down, as Dr. Moore said. We're ramping up the surgeries again. We're stabilizing the hospitals. The percent positivity has gone from 40 down to 13%. So because of the hard work that everyone's done, we're seeing movement in a positive way.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Jeff Gray with the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jeff.
Oh, thanks. Hi, Premier. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned more consequences possibly for people that are disobeying the rules, disobeying the law in Ottawa. There's a lot of concern in Ottawa, I think, about the police not just being unable to handle the protest, the situation there, but concerns about sympathies that the officers might have with protesters. There's been videos that have come up with OPP officers as well. Do you have any concerns? Do you have confidence in the police force's ability to handle this protest?
I have 100% confidence in our municipal police officers, provincial and federal. They've done a very, very good job considering the situation they've been thrown into. It's a very fragile situation, especially when they have children at these protests. And I encourage everyone, please, take your kids home. That is the best advice I could ever give you. Please take your kids home and please end these protests. You know, we're moving forward as a province, as a country, and this chaos is not going to be tolerated. I can promise you that. So let's all work together. Let's all get back to normal together and unite this province and unite this country.
Follow-up?
Just switching gears just to the vaccine passport. The other option, which some have called for, is extending it to the 3 doses at some point. Can you explain why that wasn't the path you went down?
Well, first of all, we're seeing a decline, as I said, in hospitalizations, and I just don't want to repeat everything I just mentioned, but I think we're going in the right direction, and I'm confident if we continue moving down this path, there won't be a reason for it. And I'll pass it to Dr. Moore. Thank you.
Well, I agree with the Premier. We are now down the slope from the peak of Omicron activity. 92% of Ontarians 12 and over have received at least 2 doses, and 6.7 million Ontarians now have their 3rd doses. So we have the level of protection that we need to remove public health measures and have made terrific strides on reducing the risk. Our health system is in a much better position now. We have 1,369 people in hospital